Do you remember why we did diatribes?
I remember that we were talking about, well, we were both we had a lot of anxiety about the upcoming invasion, right? And we wanted to do something about it. I mean, that's the thing. I think a lot of people felt very powerless. Like, oh my God, there's this mechanism, this machinery that's about to start killing people. And we're powerless, even though we're part of the society that empowers the machine, right? We're part of we're the gears, we're part of it. But yet we couldn't do anything.
Well, I don't know if we made any difference in any sort of large scale, but I've never concerned myself with that as an artist. I feel that, I completely believe in small actions creates big actions, which create revolutions. And if I was doubtful of that, I'm not after the Tunisian revolution, where one person who just had enough of being shaken down burned himself in protest. In fact, I made a project about it, Thora, right after it happened, because I was just in Tunisia and Egypt, and then suddenly I'm watching my Facebook feed explode with people who are going to protest in Tunisia, which to me was shocking because I was just there and everyone told me in all of their history that they're such a peaceful people. They've only protested collectively twice. Once when the prices of bread went up, and once when Tunisia supported the United States in the war against Iraq. And to find this like everyday thing that can just happen, like another shakedown, another corrupt official, and someone who just...
The straw that broke the camel's back. So the Arab Spring happened, and that I think nobody anticipated.
I call it the Arab Spring, winter and fall, and the ongoing Iraq War, which for Americans has ended, but for me has not. My father still lives in Iraq, and that's still a daily reality.
It's interesting how that sort of looks back to original diatribes, that we had 4 screens and we kind of created these artificial borders as well. We also had 4 points of view, right? We had a lot of you talking in one, a lot of me talking in another, and the other 2 had the media and live protest footage. So we kind of were already kind of going there as well. Maybe that happened naturally because we were being affected by all those different kinds of conversations that are going on around us. We kind of maybe grouped them that way. But it's interesting how that idea of borders continues to play out.
Diatribes is the 4 boxed video streams. You and me interviewing each other, very much like this. And then the protests that you went to, I didn't go because I was afraid of being kicked out of the country or deported. And then the news feed that was happening that 6 months. And then so we conceived of the 5th box, which we had a booth that you and I created in a separate space of the museum, and the audience was invited to come speak into a microphone, and there were questions on the wall, and they were responding to this highly political exhibition, right? And that audio was being transferred to somewhere else in the gallery, and we recorded it, and then later put that documentation where there was a camera looking at the people watching. No, it was looking at the people sitting on the couch watching diatribes and hearing the response. Yeah. And you told me from the get-go, after that piece was made, that you felt it was not a successful piece. Why is that?
I think that when you try and get people to respond in an inorganic way, where you try to put them in a situation where they're being asked to respond to anything, to a work of art, that it's stilted and it gets dumbed down. People want to say, oh, I liked it, or I didn't like it, or yeah, interesting, or whatever they want to say, or maybe they argue about some little point like, I really didn't like the way this person kept looking over their shoulder or something like that. And it sort of becomes, the mob mentality of just, yell something and have somebody respond to that yell, and it's not necessarily a thought out intellectual emergence.
And I wonder about the authenticity of it. I think about the Palestinian-Israeli wall, where the Palestinians call it the apartheid wall, the Israelis call it the security fence. And everywhere this wall is, when it's near a checkpoint, it's where it's the most vibrant, and it has the most graffiti, the most political art, and it's usually never in Arabic. It's always in English, maybe Spanish and French, but almost always in English. And it's completely made for the journalist to photograph someone right in front of it. I mean, those checkpoints are rarely used by Palestinians themselves. They're not allowed to use them, right? Those are usually going to Israel.
So over the last decade, the Middle East has still been a hot spot, right? And it hasn't cooled off when we focused our attention somewhere else. Politically, internationally, this is still a huge hot spot on the planet, and many things have happened there. But this has just been this thing in progress from probably, from 9/11 on. This has been on the political stage and on the media stage.
I was just looking at your project, Nostalgia for Never Was,
Yes.
with the antiquated camera, which immediately makes me giddy because I love those things.
Yeah.
And then there's the screen on the back with this rotating image, and there's a model in there.
I wanted this hybrid, this marriage between the old and the new, something that's very obviously new. In other words, a 3D model that looks like a 3D model. It doesn't really look, a simple one. That's obviously a person, but a 3D model of a person, no mistaking it for a real person. And I created this fictional character out of this model that he exists and he's trying to find substance, because he exists as if he's a 3D model. He's an empty shell, which is what 3D models are, like eggshells. And he's trying to find some real substance. So he searches the internet. He exists in the electronic space, his world. And he searches from computer to computer, looking for substance, looking for something more than the empty shell. And he's he's nostalgic for something that never really was. He's nostalgic for a time that had its own problems, but in retrospect, we look back and it just looks like beautiful nostalgia, antiques and things that were all pure and goodness, of when things were really made properly and made well out of wood and were crafted very well. And he's trying to find his answer in this world, and so he places himself into images of the past. And as I was working on it, it emerged for me that this is very much a political piece for me, in the way that I feel that the conservatives are really trying to find the past. They want, in my mind, this might be argued, the conservative might say, no, you're wrong about this, that they're looking for this purity of, let's say, the 50s, of at least what we think of the 50s from now, of when everyone knew what their roles were. A marriage was between a man and a woman. Everyone knew what they were supposed to be doing. There wasn't all this questioning about, all this liberalism about how things can go this way and that way, and the legalization of marijuana and all this kind of stuff. This is liberal craziness, in their eyes. And they're looking for this purity of a time when things were much more straightforward. And the thing is that it never was back then. It's through the lens of the present, only looking back at this time, thinking that yes, it was pure, but of course it had its own problems, and people were still people back then, and it still had probably many of the similar problems of today, maybe just with different manifestations of those problems. So it's sort of this relentless quest for something that never really existed, because it is only through the lens of the moment, and that's really what this piece became about.
I think that's really interesting, because I have these conversations with my students all the time when they try to resurrect imagery or symbols of the 50s or the 60s or the 40s, and they speak in a language. First of all, they've never experienced that era, right? Mm-hmm. And they speak in this language as if that purity of time, where I have to remind them that nuclear bombs have been going off and people were doing duck and cover tests, and formula milk came out. Everybody was interested in science and progress and the future and sci-fi comic books, but it's a different prediction altogether.